Thank you very much for having me. I am excited. Like I told you guys, please don't. We are a University of Maryland spin out, but I'm really excited to speak with the Hopkins group. I'm a Baltimore area native, and have been a huge fan of the amazing research that goes on at Hopkins for my whole life, really. So yeah, like Chuck said, my company's name is NextStep Robotics. We are a UMB spin out, focusing on a unique rehabilitation robotic protocol that actually allows people to actually rehabilitate themselves years after stroke. I will go a little bit into my background of how I got involved. So I started initially working with this team of investigators, actually as an intern during my undergraduate degree at Towson University. I wanted to become a physical therapist. I got an internship opportunity to learn a little bit about research of what was behind it. We were fully intending on going into PT school. But then I realized that, somebody has to kind of direct the way that physical therapy and rehabilitation progresses. And I realized that research is the way to do that. And by getting involved in the research, I could have a little bit stronger of an impact, to have a little wider reach in my work rather than one patient at a time kind of deal. That was pretty naive. Of me initially. I didn't realize how slowly research often translates into the clinical world, and effectively, NextStep became my kind of attempt to speed up that translational process. While I was with the University of Maryland and the Baltimore VA, I grew to a position where I was coordinating the majority of the research for the Maryland Exercise Robotics Center of Excellence. It was called Mercy. It was a center of excellence at the VA. It's no longer around, but one of my partners was the founding director of that. While I was coordinating all of those research studies, I went back to school. I got my master's in healthcare administration, took my first business class, got bit by the business bug, and said, I need to keep going with this. Followed that up immediately with an MBA. And then started to really look at the technologies we were developing with a different kind of light, and really seeing, okay, I've been working with this team for 10 years and we've got something that we've published that, we're durably reversing foot drop in stroke patients a decade after stroke, so to the point where they're throwing their assistive devices away. How can we actually get this out there? So I started to look into ways to do that. That's when I was introduced to the ecosystem in Baltimore, and I'll go into that here in a little bit. But that's really how we got kick-started here. So I'll start off with a little bit of information, background stuff on NextStep and the technology. So initially when I came to the group at Mercy, what we were doing was primarily exercise-based research, really seeing how exercise could affect the rehabilitation of stroke patients, looking primarily at chronic stroke greater than 6 months out since stroke. But one of the things that we noticed is that there was a real biomechanical limitation that the majority of stroke patients were facing that really limited their ability to have those cardiovascular benefits that we expect to see from exercise. So effectively, we could exercise them to a certain intensity, and then we couldn't increase intensity anymore to maintain a level of exercise physiology where you want to see the cardiovascular improvements. We would get them, they would plateau about 2 weeks into their exercise, and we couldn't advance them anymore because of the biomechanical limitation that foot drop causes. I'm sure most of you are aware what foot drop is, but I'll just quickly, it's the inability to raise your toe when walking. So you see a lot of patients wear an ankle foot orthotic, which is a hard brace that really immobilizes the ankle. It serves a great purpose and helps reduce falls and things, but the other thing it does is it teaches learned disuse and actually helps promote a little bit of muscle degradation. So really, and a lot of I was in charge of following the adverse events and things like that with our research. And a lot of the adverse events were in the middle of the night when patients were going from their bed to the restroom because they weren't wearing their braces. So that was obviously there was something there that wasn't really affecting them. When we noticed that my founding partners at the Dr. Macco and Dr. Larry Forrester reached out to a group out of MIT that was developing a novel neuroplasticity training robotic device for the arm, and thought, okay, maybe we can get someone to come down and we can kind of get the same effect. It started out by creating a seated trainer that you see here in the middle of the picture. But what we noticed is with doing research with the seated trainer was we weren't getting a similar effect that the upper extremity was. That's when Dr. Macco hypothesized that because walking is so much more of a complex neurological neurological chain involving the midbrain, that we really needed to get it up and walking. And that's when we separated from the team with MIT and started developing our own kind of control strategy that involved the robotic device so that we could actually walk with it. That's when we started having these aha moments. So this is a randomized study that took on average 3.5 years post-stroke. It wasn't a huge trial, but it was randomized. We had about 17 people per group. And what we ended up seeing was as people were exercising, this first 2 weeks of exercise, we saw a rather robust change in their ability to raise their toe during their swing phase while they're walking. And then we saw that it started to level out a little bit. And we said, okay, this is great. This is, again, with no assistance or anything. These are some of the benefits we were starting to see. My favorite metric to look at to show how durable and how well this works is the bar plot here. So what we're looking at is the blue bar represents heel first foot contacts. So when someone with foot drop walks, they typically will hit the ground either with their toe, with the side of the foot, but really for safe walking, what you want to do is have a nice heel first foot landing and then a smooth rocker motion. So at the beginning of the study, we had about 20% or so of heel first foot contacts for people while they were walking. We put them through 6 weeks of training, 3 times a week, for about 45 minutes. That's all they wore the robot. They wore the robot only in the clinic during training. They didn't do anything at home. So we got them up to 55% heel first foot strikes. Now, I'll remind you, this is in chronic stroke. Some of these participants were 10 or 15 years out of stroke. 85% of them started to discard or downgrade their assistive devices, including canes, crutches, and AFOs. But then we said, go home, come back in 6 weeks. And now what we'll do is we want to see how much you lose. We fully anticipated seeing them actually lose some of that ability. However, when they came back to us was our first kind of huge aha moment. They came back and we recorded a 99.4% heel first foot landing. So what that told us is that we were having that desired neuroplastic effect, giving them that new neural access to that anterior tib muscle that's responsible for lifting the toe. And then they were going into the community and they were using it. We were getting anecdotal evidence of going grocery shopping for the first time in several years and things like that. So we were not just improving their ankle function, we were improving their mobility and actually their life. We were expanding their life space and improving their general quality of life. So we saw continued improvement 6 weeks after training, and that was really kind of, okay, we've got to really push this thing and see how we can get it going forward. So this is a good example of someone who was in our trial. This is after 6 weeks of training. On the left there, she had been wearing a functional electronic stim device, an FES device, for 2.5 years. And that's as good. That was kind of the technical and really still is the technological gold standard for treatment of foot drop. But that's as good as it was able to get them on the left. we put her on the robot for about 18 hours over 6 weeks, and we got her to where she was on the right. This was a healthy late 20s active female who had a normal BMI and was a non-smoker. So I like to highlight that. So it's not like we got someone who wasn't already on an exercise routine or anything like that, and we saw the benefits from that. These are functional benefits from the device itself. And you can see the other thing we noticed is it wasn't just changes in the ankle function itself, but it was really changes of the whole kinematic chain. You can see there's better knee flexion, and you can see there's way less hip hike and circumduction of the leg. So what we're doing is, again, focusing on that economy of gait, normalizing the gait pattern and creating a better level of symmetry. That's going to help them really access the community better. So we're celebrating. We've got this great thing. Success, job's done. All right, let's sell this product and get it out there and put it in the hands of clinicians to make everyone's lives better. Well, problem is there was no secured IP. At that point in time, we hadn't even disclosed the IP to the university. So that was the first step we had to take. The device that we were working with, it cost us $130,000 to build it. There's not too many clinics that can really access a device that costs that kind of money. The device was huge. The controller panel on it was about the size of a washing machine, and the robot had to be tethered directly to the device. Regulatory, what was that? That's where we were at that standpoint. Reimbursement, how do we do anything like that? No idea. Those were all the questions that we were asking ourselves there. And that's where I kind of tried to fill in and step up and move the idea forward. So where NextStep is now, we got the device cost down to less than $20,000. That's our sales target. That's not our cost to build. Is significantly less than that. We've got $7.5 million in funding, including a large cooperative agreement with NIH. We'll be opening up a clinical 120-person randomized clinical trial this summer at Rehab. We've got 7 full-time employees. We've brought manufacturing in-house, developed our own internal quality management system, identified that clear regulatory pathway. We're going to go to market initially as a Class 2 510K exempt exercise device. That allows us to go to market without having the FDA hard approval as an exercise device. We just have to register it. We will then follow up after our clinical trial, and we'll file a full marketing 510K where we'll be able to market the device as a therapeutic. Defined reimbursement strategy. While the device itself won't be reimbursed, we now know that we can actually have the use of the device reimbursed through codes for neuromuscular reeducation. Currently in the physical therapy setting, when they do this type of training, they bill for gait training. We can get a higher billing code if they use our device for neuromuscular reeducation. Now, we are facing kind of the penultimate test now of, will the market accept the device? And that's when we're developing our sales strategy now.
Brad, it's real. Your regulatory strategy is great, but could you explain in more detail why it's a two-step? What each one gets you? Because it's a great example of a way to go to market.
Yeah, absolutely. So effectively, there is a specific class of devices called exercise devices. They have to be non-significant risk, meaning they don't, and they have to, so they cannot, and it's 510K exempt. There's Class 2 and Class 1 510K exempt devices, and it actually goes outside of exercise devices. So essentially, they have to not perform a function that is life-sustaining. They can't be an implantable device, and there's things like that. By targeting the 510K exempt, it actually will allow us to start selling the device before we prove final efficacy of the system itself. Because we're able to allow patients to exercise at a functional level that they aren't able to exercise at if they're not wearing the device.
What's the limitations? of that?
The limitation is our marketing strategy. We can't market the device as, hey, this is going to cure your foot drop. Hey, this is going to reverse it. This is going to make it so that you can get rid of your assistive device. We can point to the journal articles that we published saying those things, but we don't have FDA approval that will allow us to directly market that. What it will do is allow us to get to market about 3 years sooner. And then what we can do following up with that is we can actually go file a 510K that will allow us to be able to market when we prove the device has that therapeutic capabilities. Now there's another pathway that we were looking at, the FDA suggested to us, as which is called a breakthrough designation. Breakthrough designation, you can go after if you have a device that there really isn't any strong evidence of another device that can help treat the patient population that you're working with, but you have strong preliminary evidence and you have a really clear research protocol pathway to prove efficacy of the device. But if you go the breakthrough pathway, the whole purpose of that is to shorten the time length to get 510K approval, and you can't launch into market as a 510K exempt process going down the breakthrough pathway. So it's really kind of it's a balancing act, getting to market earlier with a little bit less of a value proposition versus holding off going to market with a stronger value proposition later. So the way we're going to approach it is by having a bit of a softer initial launch as an exercise device, and then go with a much heavier launch later on as a 510K approved device. Does that make sense, Chuck?
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So to get where we are, really what we focused on is milestone-driven growth. We started out initially, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the Maryland Innovation Initiative and TEDCO. That was our first kind of money in, was going and getting that kind of funding to build our initial feasibility prototype to show that we could build a system that was portable and robust. So we got that money in. I set a hard standard with myself, saying I wasn't going to move into the company full time to really push this forward until I saw a clear licensing pathway for the company itself. If you don't have secure IP, you don't have a company. So I knew that I needed to get, in order to have security to quit my secure state job, I wanted to go make sure I had that license. So once I got that license set up, I raised a little bit of startup funding from a local investor as well as my co-founders. And then we really pushed hard into proof of concept prototyped. In 4 months, we delivered a prototype that we were able to actually demonstrate and raise money off of. And then we started planning the clinical trials, leverage. Every time we got anything, every time we made headlines, we followed that up by raising money to help push us even further. That's why you kept seeing me in the news, Chuck, because we hit a win, and then we raised money off the win. It takes about 6 months to close a funding round. So we would get a grant, we close a funding round. We hit a technology development milestone, we close a funding round. That's how we kind of snowballed effect to get to where we are today. So that's largely about how NextStep came to be and where we're at now. So what I'll go into next is, what I'll tie in is kind of a little more detail on that pathway, but it's a little less focused on how NextStep went in, and it's a little bit broader on kind of the strategy that I took as an approach. And really this was the strategy I kind of laid out from the beginning. And it was a linear path that kind of curved up and down, but as long as you're going through this pathway and headed in the right direction, that's really what you want to do. So the first thing that we had to do is we had to do that technology evaluation. Is this a strong technology for translational processes? So we had to initially identify that pain point to see, okay, this is something that actually is a problem. Then we had to build the solution. We built the search solution. Okay, it didn't work out quite as well as we hoped. Let's take the data away. Let's see if we can refine and prove the solution even further. We did that. We took it walking. And then we had to ask the question, okay, this works. That's answered the question of whether or not we could. Now we need to answer the question of whether or not we should. So is the market really big enough? Well, stroke is the leading cause of disability in the world. So if we're targeting that key demographic, that's really good. We also know that foot drop is caused by all different types of neurological, it's often a symptom of neurological impairment. Parkinson's disease, MS, orthopedic injury, or even surgery. I think it's 5% of hip and knee replacements end up with foot drop. There's 1 million hip and knee replacements a year. Again, that's not a small market on its own. 30% of people who have stroke do have permanent disability due to foot drop. So we can really kind of push this thing forward. The other thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure we talk to as many potential customers and partners as possible early and often. We started developing the initial device directly with physical therapists that were at University of Maryland Rehab and Orthopedic Institute. We actually, and one of their therapists actually went on and got her PhD on our device itself. So we worked directly with PTs, we worked directly with stroke patients, made sure that it was comfortable, it was ergonomic, and it was something that if we got the form factor right, it could actually fit into their workflow. That's why we targeted the research protocol in the way we did. 6 weeks, 3 times a week for 30 to 60 minutes. That is typical for stroke rehabilitation at their facility. So that's what we targeted. If we can do something that improves outcomes in that workflow space, then we actually have a product that we can push forward. Now, when you're doing the technology evaluation, it's really difficult not to fall for a cool engineering trap. I do a lot of technology evaluations now for a group called the Maryland Development Center, who is a medical device startup studio in Baltimore. And I'm also on a standing committee member for NINDS's neurotranslational programs through the HEAL and Brain initiatives. And what we see a lot is these people a lot of faculty and put out really good, strong ideas, but lack the commercialization component of it. The grants that I review really weigh heavily on the commercialization strategy. So a great example here, Rewalk. Rewalk is a full lower body exoskeleton device. They were initially targeting spinal cord injury. The idea was that they were going to sell it one-to-one, sell it directly to the patients themselves. Well, first off, spinal cord injury is a really small population, so pretty quickly they tried to see if they could adapt to the stroke market. The other thing is, what was the regulatory strategy? That was kind of there, but not really well thought out to an extent where they had a real way to prove clinical outcomes from a rehabilitation standpoint to use the device. Reimbursement, like I said, they were planning on selling these devices to individual patients. You're dealing with a disabled population. A lot of them are on disability. They don't have a lot of money. They're not going to be able to afford to pay for a $70,000 or $120,000 exoskeleton system. And insurance isn't going to pay for it either. Insurance is going to pay for the $2,000 Jazzy scooter that actually gives the individual more mobility and costs them a whole lot less. So what ended up happening with Rewalk is, you can see they IPO'd rather early back in 2015, and they've dropped dramatically, and they've done a rather aggressive series of post IPO capital raises, which is really not a good place that a company wants to be in. So that's why it's really important. Yes, it's a cool engineering idea. It's something that will, in the future, I hope that we can get it to people. But as of right now, it needs to be a little bit more robust. So, like I said, after you do your technology evaluation, what about the IP? How are you going to bring the IP out of the university? So this is the pathway that I followed and the decision-making tree. You guys are at Hopkins. From my understanding, it's a very similar pathway. You invent and you disclose the technology to your Office of Technology Transfer. That's when you first start interacting with JHTV. For us, UM Ventures and things like that. And you create that patent and you file a provisional patent initially. You got about a year to turn it into a full patent. Okay, but this is where the real decision comes in. Is this a piece of technology that's good enough to create a standalone company around, meaning does it have the market and to be able to support a company? And is there really, are you going to be able to achieve market penetration in a way that can support a company? The other option is this something I should license directly to an existing company? Neither one of these pathways are worse than the other. And oftentimes for faculty, licensing the technology to an existing company is a great thing to do. Our faculty physicians are really good at being faculty physicians. We want to keep some of our physicians to doing that work that's so important for healthcare. So it takes a lot of work to start up a company, and it's not really something that you can push forward as a side job. So it's really a good idea to find that founder, like myself, like I was for my co-founders, to really be the engine of the company that really drives it forward. That's how you end up raising money. Investors want to see that there is someone on the ground that is pushing this technology forward on a day-to-day basis. It's not something that they're doing part-time. That gives them that ability to see, okay, I can see how this is going to get through market in a reasonable timeline.
Brad, there's a hybrid model there, which I think many university technologies have, and that's it. What if a technology isn't mature enough to go to an existing company, but it's tougher, you don't know if you can grow it? Can you describe, I'm sure you've thought of that and how that works.
Absolutely. And what you're getting at is a great kind of funding mechanism that you can really use called the SBIR programs. It's really NSF, NIH, pretty much every government agency has these SBIR grants. SBIR grants have to go to a company, though. They can't go through a university. You can get a similar grant called an STTR. That can go to a university, but the idea is to, again, focus on technology translation. You can create a standalone startup company. You can get the SBIR, and you can actually subcontract back to the university some of the work to be done. To do that, though, there has to be a 50% or more FTE PI within the company. So you can go ahead, you can do those early feasibility studies, you can do animal testing, all the kind of early stage commercial activities that you would want to do to prove the technology. And then once you prove the technology, then you can make the decision of, okay, do we want to continue pushing this and try to take this thing all the way to the market, or should we license it to an existing company or maybe even be acquired? Sorry to keep bringing up University of Maryland ones, but that's my kind of area that I've been. Harpoon Medical is a really good example of a really strong technology for valve replacement technology. They developed the technology, they built it out, they proved the feasibility, then they got acquired for $200 million. So again, they could have taken it to market, but it was a lot quicker for them to turn around and push it through. And then that way, Dr. Gammy got to stay on as a cardiac surgeon, which is what we need him to be in the area. So for licensing from the universities, you really got to, this is a tough negotiation, and really kind of at the bottom here, really want to highlight, always consult with your own legal counsel. University attorneys are just that, attorneys for the university. You want to have your own legal counsel to help make sure that you're getting what you need for a proper, fair And it's not about somebody winning or losing. You want to have a fair license agreement. If it's weighted too heavily one way or the other, it's gonna alert investors, particularly early stage investors. They want to see what the licensing deal looks like. Try to get licensing fees initially. That should be very low. There's not going to be much money coming into the company, so negotiate milestone-based payments, fees for it. Don't stick to timeline-based, because your timeline's going to be wrong. That's just the nature of the beast. You're going to set a timeline of what you want to achieve, but your milestones, there's going to be things that are going to go a little faster sometimes. Some things are going to go a little slower. So that's really what you want to focus on for that. Now, in terms of getting the license, you really want to make sure that you do a lot of those early kind of lean startup kind of ideas where you're going out and you're talking to customers, you're proving that you've got stakeholder input, your business model is really well thought out. You've got 5-year projections. They don't need to be accurate. They're not going to be accurate, but they need to be well thought out, and they need to show that you have a story of how you're going to get through the next 5 years. Okay, this is what we're going to do to develop. This is what we're going to do to test, and this is how we're going to try to enter the market. You want to have that as well thought out as possible. Again, like I said, customer discovery. Show that you've talked to 100 customers. That's really important to do, and it will help answer a lot of your own assumptions that you have around the technology. And then lastly, clearly identify who is going to pay and why they are going to pay. Highlight those value propositions. Just because something works doesn't mean somebody's going to pay for it. You have to really show them, okay, this is going to make or save the customer money. And that can be in ways of time and efficiency or as a capital asset itself. For funding opportunities, there's a lot of them. You can start out initially with going after friends and family. I'm not real sure on the JHTV structure, but Ventures has mechanisms that they can give $25,000 to $50,000 for exploratory if you've got a good business model laid out to do that early. They'll pay for your animal study to get that done. And then after that, they'll pay for that data that you need to get so that you can go after the Maryland Innovation Initiative, the NSF or the NIH SBIR programs. Those are not what's called non-dilutive funding, meaning they don't take a part of your company. Once you get grants like that and start getting that traction, then you can start talking to the angel investors. That's when you start getting diluted a little bit. And it's okay to get diluted. People are often very adverse to dilution. But as long as you're increasing the overall valuation of the company, it's okay to sell a piece of it because that's going to help you step up to the next point. And then you can figure out whether or not you even want to go the venture capital route. If you bring someone like NEA on board, you're going to have a whole nother corporate structure that you might not be ready for at that time. So those are other things you need to think about, the type of money and the type of oversight that different types of money are going to bring into the company. You might start out as an LLC. We had to convert over to a C Corp relatively early because one of our investors wanted us, to have to, a C Corp has a little bit more oversight from an SEC, Security Exchange Commission. We have to file things a little more regularly, or we're required to have more regular board meetings and things like that. So investors sometimes like to see that you're a C Corp so that they know you're having board meetings and things like that. Like I said, this is the real sweet spot. Get as many as you can of these. They don't take any of your company, and they do nothing but add value to you. Skip that one here.
Hey, there's a question from the audience, if we could interrupt.
Sure.
Awesome. Someone from our audience asks, your example of the subject with FES intervention plateaued and then improved with NextStep. Was that a one-off, or do you expect NextStep to yield improved results over FES?
Yes, that was one patient with FES. We've had several patients with FES go through our training protocol. And then actually what we do is while they're going through the training protocol, we ask them not to wear the functional electronic stim, so they go back so to not confound the study. But we have seen that in multiple patients now.
Great, thank you. Does that bear on the intended use or claims that you'll do in the 510K stage?
Yes, absolutely. Because we believe that we'll be able to go one step further than where FES, where we'll be able to go where FES was initially planning to go, which is as a therapeutic option, a therapeutic training device. FES has become more of an assistive device technology. It's really kind of shown that it didn't hit the therapeutic effects that a lot of people were really hoping that it would. And there's been studies that have come out that shown it's very, very much equivalent to an AFL.
Great, thanks very much, and thanks for the question.
So feasibility first, test it out. We got an award from the AMBLE Foundation and the MII, and we wanted to initially show, okay, we can build this system in a form factor that can be worn on just the body. It's actually something that can be powered by, we actually initially powered it with a DeWalt drill battery, and I took it out into the parking lot just to show that, it's wireless now. It's something you can see I'm controlling it with an app on my phone, to show that, we've made those next steps where it can really, no pun intended, go into the clinic and things like that. So we tested it on 10 stroke patients. We showed it worked. We did that in 4 months' time with the Maryland Development Center and their engineers. We turned around. I did my first pitch ever to the Maryland Momentum Fund after those 4 months, and we got our first $250,000 commitment in funding. And again, leveraged that and ended up raising $900,000 from that funding round. So, regulatory. I went into this a lot with Chuck's question, so I won't go too far into it now. But really, you want to focus on your regulatory strategy from the beginning. Know what a PMA is, know what de novo means, and know what 510K. A lot of investors, if you say you're going the PMA route, they'll walk away. That's often a 25-year plan to get to the market. They want to see, 5 to 10 year returns on their funding. So if you can find a pathway that's much quicker via de novo, or even better 510K, meaning there's a substantially equivalent device on the market already, that's really what you want to go after. But regulatory strategy doesn't end just at the FDA. You also have to consider FDA, or it doesn't just end at the clinical part. You also have to look at things like your ISO 13485s and your 6601. That's going to be your manufacturing standards to make sure that you're meeting all current good manufacturing standards. You have to have a quality management system set up. I learned the hard way that that's not a small feat to do, but it was a challenge that we wanted to take on, and we've done it successfully now. So know those types of strategies well. So after you've got all that figured out, you've got the gap, you demonstrated feasibility, you developed a plan, you've got a strong market size there. All right, now I can make my dreams come true, right? Wrong. Teamwork makes the dream work. You really want to focus on building a strong core team. The team of a startup company is really, really important here. The founding team should really have deep subject matter experts. Me and my co-founders have over 60 years spread amongst us in stroke rehabilitation and actually rehabilitation robotics. It's perfectly good to hire young, ambitious talent. Most of my engineers have come directly out of local universities. And then we were able to get my faculty, a CTO, to come on board with the company full time. So we've got a really strong, deep subject matter experts to oversee the engineering development. So it's great to get those younger, talented, ambitious hires, as long as you have the ability to kind of keep pushing them forward. So the next thing you want to do is focus on sales strategy. You need to realize that there's many different customer segments there. And you need to figure out which ones need to be prioritized. Who's going to be the early adopters? Can my sales strategy differ from one to the other? And learn how to identify, how to qualify customers early on. Is the person I'm talking to the person who actually has decision-making power? And does this organization have the budget? It comes down to it just asking them outright sometimes. So we're going to come in. We know our device works well with complementary technologies. So we're partnering with other manufacturers in the space, Biodex, Simbex, large rehab companies. And we're going to partner with them and share Rolodexes to be able to get into clinics and say, okay, if you've got an overhead walking system, this is a great opportunity. We know the team with Artec well. So, and then we also have a very tactile solution in a hands-on industry. So we know we've been hurt this year without having the in-person conferences and things. So we know that we're going to really focus hard this year, this fall, going on one-to-one clinics. That means we need to focus on key opinion leader type clinics. So that's kind of how the whole timeline to get to where we are. And I think it's a very similar pathway that a lot of people can follow. And I got a couple more slides just to represent. There's a lot of people are a little bit risk adverse as to making the leap to do the technology transfer itself. The Maryland opportunity is huge. There's a tremendous amount of support programs that the state offers. The biotech tax credit, they will actually write your investors a check for half of their investment. It goes directly into their pockets. They can then turn around and reinvest that money into you if they want, or they can make that investment, but they get an immediate return. We've gotten it 3 years in a row and for 4 investors now. There's R&D tax credit, Ventures, Baltimore Fund. These are all things that help trying to kind of drive the economic value of the city by floating the entrepreneur ecosystem in the best way. One I missed on here is TEDCO. TEDCO is a phenomenal resource to target. If you don't know about them, I think it's an incredibly well-kept secret. They've been around for over 25 years, but they're really starting to get out there. And they're one of the lead early stage investors actually in the country, the MII fund. We've got an advantage as compared to most startups being located here. If we want to have a good conversation with the FDA, CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid, we can set up not this year, but we can set up an in-person meeting with them. Meeting face-to-face has a lot of tangible benefits as opposed to, just having a phone call with them. And then the same thing goes for the SBIR programs through DevCom, DoD, NSF, or NIH. Again, you can go to their events, you can meet their program officers, and you can get that's the best way to get that type of funding, is to really kind of introduce yourself initially. SBIRs and investment. You don't want, when you're approaching an investor, you don't want that to be the first time they've ever heard of who you are. So that's, again, push that outreach as much as you can. If you go to them and they say, oh, I've heard of NextStep, they might not know a whole lot about you, but if you've heard about you, okay, why have I heard about them? It increases how curious they are about things. I do got to do a little plug here for the Maryland Development Studio, or the Maryland Development Center studio. They take technologies working directly with faculty they've got companies that they build the companies around the faculty founders themselves. They have a very heavy engineering focus. The founder of MDC is the vice chair of ECE at College Park. So that was my engineering team that built that first initial feasibility prototype that led to that first money in. It's a great system. They've got a great pathway to do technology evaluations and to really help bring technologies forward. The last one is, there really is top talent here in Maryland. The real reason why there were so many of the finalists for when Amazon was picking their HQ2 was because there is more talent here in Maryland than anywhere else. There's per capita more PhDs than anywhere else in the world other than Massachusetts. You know, we'll let them have it for now. But yeah, there's job growth here. There's local organizations focusing on driving things forward, and really helping build the ecosystem itself from the talent on up. Thank you. That's what I have for today. I would love to answer questions if anyone has any, dive deeper into anything.
Well, thanks, Brad. That is a great story. It certainly justifies why you got all the attention you have in the last several years. It is a great example for any of you here of how to take technology out of the university and the steps. So if you have any questions about how to do it, please unmute and ask, or put it in the chat and we'll ask.
So I wanted to make a comment about your comment that if it's a PMA, people just won't look at it since it's a 25-year journey. So roughly that's what you said. And in part, that's maybe true because it is a long road and it's hard work and lots of money is needed, and, you know, Series A, B, C, and most likely some big companies will have to step in. But it is the kind of thing that academics can deep dive because it's a pioneering work, and it is then worth a bigger, deeper fortune, even though roadmap is longer.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and particularly when you're dealing with biologics and therapeutics, that's the only route to go. My background is obviously way more focused in the med device space, but yeah, you're absolutely right. If that's the pathway, that doesn't mean, if that's the only pathway available to you, that doesn't mean don't do it. It just means it will be a bit harder.
Let me just take two things. One is if anyone's going to leave, I put a survey in the chat line. Please take 2 minutes to fill out the survey and move forward. Just since it wasn't explained what a PMA is. A PMA is a class 3 device. It's very high risk for an individual. It's life supporting, or if it fails, it's life threatening. Most medical devices aren't that. Very small number are, but it does take a lot of money and a lot of clinical trials. But thank you, Nitish, for bringing that up, because if it is revolutionary and groundbreaking, there are investors out there who will do that. We have a technology that came out of Hopkins that was now licensed by a technology, and they're on that path.
And all 510Ks initially had to start with a device that went the PMA pathway.
Oh, you had a question?
Yeah. Great presentation. Thank you. I also have, that's a very creative regulatory pathway. I'm also interested in robotics, and I want to understand this better. So in your case, you were able to kind of categorize it as exercise device, but from what I understand, it affects your marketing, but let's say a physical therapy center can just buy it just as any other any other exercise systems to use. So in our research, we deal with assistive robotic technologies for surgeries, and there is also the off-label use that the surgeons can do. So where can this creativity and regulatory pathways extend? Like as long as you don't market it, can you deal with these kinds of systems? Or I guess in your case, there was like a few other things like not implantable right. So, yeah. But I wonder if you have in your research seen some other perhaps more creative or different types of these use of these categorizations to postpone the 510K decision.
Yeah, there are creative ways that people go into things. I'm not particularly familiar with surgical robotics and how that might be used. My strategy actually came from working closely with Simbex, who is a large rehab technology company, and they've used that pathway, and I found out later that Biodex has used that pathway many times. Because it's a rehabilitation device, it's used during exercise, during therapeutic exercises. So that's something that they regularly go through, and sometimes they find that they don't even need to go the 510K because there's enough of a market adoption with it as an exercise device entirely. But yeah, I wouldn't be able to help you with surgical robotics or anything like that. That's probably not in the non-significant risk category.
Right. I guess that's where somebody has to read the fine print, and yeah.
No, but in that case, what I would say is to look up the investigational device exemptions, and what kinds of pathways there are around IDEs.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great question. More generally, if something goes in as a class 2 with a particular intended use and a particular charge code, right, which is something that you talked about, right? So that might be faster path and lower risk, but remember it's a lower charge code, and so the question is, if a physician is using a technology off-label, how can that physician charge, right? Can they at all? Are they limited to a lower charge code? Could they charge at the higher charge code even though it's being used off-label?
So I can only speak from a physical therapy charge code standpoint. Physical therapy charge codes are purely based on outcomes metrics. So if they can support the charge code based on the outcomes, testing and the level of outcome improvement, then yeah, they're able to push for the higher. That's how we will be able to go, because typically they do gait training. There's certain things, they look at 30-foot walk speeds and things like that for gait training. But what we can actually do is we can show improvement in active range of motion of the ankle. Now we're looking at actually doing neuromuscular re-education, which actually bills about $20 more per 15-minute charge.
Now I won't take any more time. Patrick, go right ahead.
Oh, Patrick.
So I was just wondering, so you showed that timeline of your funding, and I was wondering, along with that timeline, what was sort of the percentage of how complete the product was? When you first got, compared to, where it is now. So when you first got the initial funding, how much of it was?
So we started a little bit differently than a lot of companies. So we started our company with 4 positive clinical trials already underway. So we had a big bulky prototype that we've been running clinical trials at the VA already. So it was one of those things of, okay, we know this has a positive effect in people. Can we build this in a form factor that the market will actually accept, was the question. So it was more along, it was a little bit easier to do that. We are just now completing the market ready device. We're getting ready to send it down for verification. We've done our internal verification and validation testing, and we're getting ready just now to do it. So yeah, it's been 4 years to make it that portable kind of product that looks like what we want it to look like. Does that answer your question, Patrick?
Yeah.
Again, please take the survey before you leave. It's in that. Any other questions here, or I'll ask one. Brad, you had asked about you had mentioned the challenges of setting up a QMS. Can you talk about how you did that and whether you said you started later? Just describe that experience.
Yeah. So we were initially going to work with an outside company to build our whole QMS. And they were actually
QMS, by the way, is the quality management system.
Right. So we were really we ended up finding another company that's works to help develop quality management systems with medical device companies, and actually a great Johns Hopkins company is who pointed the company out to me. The company is called Greenlight Guru. My friend David Narrows, who's with Sonovex out of Hopkins, is who pointed me in their direction. So essentially what you have to do is create a design history file. There's a lot of engineers here, so they know that whole process. But you have to be able to match up specific user needs all the way to specific verification and validation testing. So if you don't have everything lined up to match that, and it's user needs, design input, design changes, verification, validation testing that proves why you did the testing, why it's important, and then all the way down to employee training. Do you train your employees properly? It is a ton and a ton of paperwork that you have to put together. Start your design history file early and update it often. We started ours a year into company formation, and the amount of kind of backtracking we had to do over just from 1 year was significant. But Greenlight Guru is the company that we use. They allow really streamlined kind of traceability so that you can see what changes are made. So that if you make a change on one document, it will get changed on all the documents that reflect that and things like that. It's fairly complicated, and yeah, it took us a good 18 months to have an audit-ready QMS.
We've had several companies around here who've not gotten started early, and it was a real challenge in terms of some of them couldn't go to market when they wanted to because they had to do that. So that's a great lesson. So, well, it's 5 o'clock. Brad said he can stay around, but thank you all for coming. And we have one more BME-X at the end in June 3rd. So, so yeah, with that, Jeff, you
no, hold that thought.
Oh, go ahead. I didn't know if you were leaving or.
Well, I invite folks to stay on if Brad is able to stay for some questions and answers afterwards. But I wanted Brad to thank you again on behalf of the Department of Biomedical Engineering at Hopkins. We really appreciate it. I especially appreciated your seminar, not only because of the success of the example that you presented, and congratulations on that, but that you presented everything in a very generalizable way.
Thank you.
Right. You talked about customer discovery and customer segmentation. You talked about design history files and quality management and regulatory 510K and so forth. And I felt like a lot of folks with ideas in the audience were really able to internalize what you were saying in ways that was meaningful to all of us. So thanks very much for that. It was really great.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really our pleasure. And the Oscars, or the movie industry has the Oscars, and BME-X has the X's. And so this Xe has your name on it. And it's a small token of appreciation from us to you. I'll have this in the mail to you tomorrow.
Well, since Brad and I live about 4 miles apart, let me personally deliver it.
That would be wonderful. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
It's our pleasure. Chuck, I'm going to give this to you, and I expect you to ride it over to Brad's house.
I will. We'll get one of those pictures of me shaking hands with him while passing it.
Chuck and Jeff, please feel free to share my contact information with I'm one of the entrepreneurs in the ecosystem that we're battling California and Massachusetts and New York. I'm here. I've been in the Baltimore area for several generations. I'm here to float us all up. So sure. I'm here
for anyone who's interested in that. Brad's point, I have always said that Maryland is a tremendous source of early stage funding. He mentioned TEDCO, MII. I don't know if it was clear, but his first round of funding was MII that comes into the university. Yep. So that funds come into university researchers first before it gets spun out into the company. So you can use that here if you've got an idea. On the end of the surveyor, that is my contact. I'm available to help people. I will certainly tap into Brad. It's great to have entrepreneurs, especially with so much success like this. And the investor tax credit. Was there, Nitish, you had a question?
No, no question. I'm just saying, Brad, I also look forward to having you lecture in our rehabilitation engineering class and next generation of student in fall. Okay.
Absolutely. Yep.
Great. Any other questions?
I enjoy doing this. It's a little bit of a break. So.